Shall we start?
Yeah, so my item is first in the agenda. So I wanted to say that we managed to make some progress on Stan's merge request. He started yesterday. You can see one of my commits linked from the agenda. We've had like a long discussion with Camille about the approach taken there, and I'm hoping for us to brainstorm a bit. We need to make a decision about which direction we take implementation-wise. There are like two ways. It's still not clear which way is better. So I think for the sake of efficiency, we should make a decision and just proceed with one of them.
Thank you for the update. So that is indeed an important piece. And our meeting today, we want to talk about a solution, because in stand-up yesterday, it was proposed to remove the Savepoint or remove the sub transactions, but we already have comments in the issue that there are concerns because this may do more harm than help, and we want to make sure that data is processed correctly, and also we have facilities to rollback operations if needed. So removing the Savepoint will be like the impact is unknown. So that's why we're here today. And Stan had several suggestions to resolve some known issues individually, but we still need to discuss what's the next steps best for us, take iterations, what do we want to do to mitigate the immediate risk, and also come up with a long-term solution. Then based on that approach, I will develop a action plan, like how we want to schedule the staffing and the timeline for the long-term solution, but short-term, what we can do.
So I think that in order to mitigate the risk, we would need to actually understand the exact mechanism of this problem, how it's happening, and it's still not exactly clear what's the root cause or what's the mechanism that triggers the performance degradation. So that's the reason why I think we should make progress on the instrumentation. It will shed some light on what is really happening there. Then I think that trying to optimize our code base in parallel, working on things that, for example, Stan suggested, I think that's a good idea. We might not be able to remove subtransactions completely because it would require us looking at the code base and seeing where these are actually necessary and useful, because there might be cases where subtransactions are useful, but I think that in most cases, our usage of subtransactions stems from engineers not fully understanding how they work, and in most cases they should not be necessary. What I suggest is that we add a rulebook static analysis tool that is going to warn engineers about subtransactions usage and would make them check how the subtransactions are supposed to work, how this mechanism actually works in Rails. This might actually make them decide that they don't need it.
I'm actually thinking like what you are doing can be actually super useful to not track only like the save points, but also track like how many operations we do in the transaction. I think like if we can somehow say that like the same as we have amount of the SQLs per request or like per operation, if you are executing, I don't know, 100 queries in the transaction, it's just gonna take a lot of like resources like to then replay that on the production and can create like a contention. So I'm kind of thinking that like what we are kind of seeing here is not that we are misusing save points. It's more like that we are using transactions that are super long, that are super wide, that log a lot of data, that kind of creates a backlog of other operations happening elsewhere. So I think what we should be actively fighting in this is like get rid of these long transactions in the first place, make them more flat.
So we checked that with Nikolai. We instrumented our code base a bit better to understand how many long-running transactions we actually have, and we were actually quite surprised to see that the number is smaller than we expected. Nikolai, do you remember the exact like duration of long-running transaction we saw?
I don't remember. No. Like,
we've got like a lot of metrics around that are quite easy to get to in a dashboard. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Nikolai.
Right. Yeah. I don't remember very long-lasting transaction, but I agree with Camille that we should, like in LTP context, we should avoid any heavy we should try to split to much smaller steps as possible.
I'm kind of like stemming from a case that like I know patterns in the code that we do n+1 type of the insert. It's like a natural case where you're gonna create a deadlock if you have a lot of concurrent operations doing exactly the same steps, because the first one inserting gonna create a lock and another transaction will have to basically wait for this to succeed. Or maybe it can be rollback sometimes, but I know that like we do, like in a lot of cases, we solve n+1, but we still have, for example, n+1 happening as insert in some cases.
All right. So something like we don't know the root cause yet, but we know that we want to remove the long transactions for heavy transactions, and there is a dashboard of the long transactions. Can we start from there to identify short term?
Just on that, Chun, like we've been monitoring the long transactions as part of like infrastructure for a very long time, and most of this is just to kind of frame things a bit. Most of the transactions that the long-running transactions have got an infradev issue, and they're some of the oldest infradev issues. And the reason why they haven't been solved is because they're all difficult problems. So the one that jumps to mind immediately is it Archive Trace Worker? That's the worst of them all. And the reason, I think most of this audience was in a call about a month ago where we were talking about that. I remember Stan was on the call and he had a suggestion on how to fix that. So, there are issues, but they aren't simple in most cases. They're kind of tricky.
But it's unlikely that the current incident is related to long-running transactions.
Right, 2 points here, because
rather focus on the depth. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So related to the long-running transactions, what we have in monitoring had issue with wrong detection of auto vacuum activity, which runs not vacuum but only analyze some table. So for some period of time, we thought that our incident is somehow related to long-running transactions, but it was auto vacuum activity. So we exclude this. Second point, we need to define long here, because in monitoring, we mean long transaction, we mean some kind of like number of seconds. Here, as I understand Camille, right, like we should try to reduce number of queries in transaction, not seconds, right?
Yes, like Stan mentioned, like these patterns save ensure something insert, and it kind of uses a transaction rollback to insert items one by one. And this is like the pattern that is extensively used, at least in the secure store reports worker. And this is clearly like a pattern that, even if you think about that, if you know like exactly how these secure reports are inserted, it's gonna create a contention on database. We may just see this contention as a slowness on the job processing of the time, or like another type of the contention. So I think we have a few patterns that kind of create or like increase the chance of the problems we are seeing in the code base.
And Rails creates Savepoints automatically, right? We don't use it explicitly.
We need to explicitly specify that we want that subtransaction to be created.
And no release Savepoints is used, right? So I mean, if we wished remove Savepoints completely, we would need to change Rails behavior. Like it should be done at that
Yes, and like by result, we would break a lot of behavior related to like how data is being rolled back.
But how many places do we actually rely on rollbacks at Savepoints?
At least this one. Because this is
but is it a handful or is it yeah, because generally it's not a great pattern in a Hive transaction database, right?
I mean, like each time that you do save, if you are in the transaction, it will open it will create a save point, because race want to be able to roll back operations if you do something finicky, for example, in the after something. If there is a race exception, it's gonna automatically roll back. So I think in a lot of
places,
it does
not roll back the whole transaction in that case. That was my sort of.
Usually it's gonna just roll back the particular changes made on this particular object.
So Savepoints is a way to.
I know how it works.
Right. Yeah.
But it's more like in the application, are we relying on that behavior and actually not, because generally we abort the whole transaction when a part of it fails, right? That's my point, not the fact that. And sort of on that, on some databases, you don't have save points, right? And Active Record works in those environments. But yeah.
Also, one point, when we say nested transactions, like nesting level is only 1, because if we have 100 save points, it's still nesting level 1. We don't have like 100. Def is not right. It's only 1, 2. That's it. And rolling back to save points, it happens only to the latest save point, right? We never roll back to previous ones, so we could release them, right? It's just.
Sorry, can you say again?
So if we created many save points, we never need to roll back to. We will always roll back only to the latest one inside transaction.
Yes.
So previous ones not needed really, right?
It's a stack-based approach.
All right, stack. Okay, but
so you may be releasing the topmost, you may be running back topmost, but it's really like a stack-based.
I see. So many rollback events might happen multiple times, so we need previous ones. I see. Okay.
So what is happening? Like usually, you may have a lot of save points within a given transaction, but it's pretty unlikely that you're gonna have very big depth unless you do something that creates 64 recursive calls to the transaction. But usually, it's gonna be more flat.
Looks like we just need to limit the number of queries in transaction. Try to not to use many of modifying queries, because selects without for update is not a problem. Updates, inserts, and selects for updates is a problem, and like we just need to reduce this number and try to make transaction shorter in terms of number of queries.
So here, what I'm thinking, we are talking about short-term things. Stan made 2 suggestions that there are 2 things he suggested we may do in short-term. Does that make sense in the issue? And also this solution, like scrub the long transactions and prevent them or reduce them, that sounds like a long-term solution to me. I mean, that maybe that's a cure of the whole problem, but it may take a while and a bunch of efforts to do that. But short term, what we can do to mitigate the risk of the incidents in short term? Any ideas?
So basically, I think that the best thing we can do right now is to improve observability, because just being a devil's advocate here, we are not even certain if the subtransactions are cause or the symptom, right? At this point, without improving observability, it's such a basic question remains unanswered. We don't know if save points are a cause or a symptom. I mean, say subtransactions logging. So the best short-term solution seems to be working on the instrumentation, and then we know that we do have some bad patterns in the code base, some of them identified by Stan, and there is no good reason not to work on them in parallel. So that's my take on this.
Right, I can confirm that in Postgres we do not know how many subtransactions are created in particular transaction. There are there is no such observability view or something like that. There is no such thing, unfortunately.
Do I understand that something like pgstar transaction does not exist?
Yeah, right. So we can only count it only on application sides, have some counter, and that's it. Right now in Postgres, you cannot. You can have only some like side effects that you can help you guess that you reached this 64 limit for subtransactions threshold.
By the way,
But,
Nikolai, have you been able to understand why creating 64 non-nested transactions also creates some additional excessive I/O events on the related to the disk?
why not nested? In my experiments, I created subtransactions, so I used Savepoints, and when we have 65 or more, we deal with non-cached, like we cache is not working, so more disk I/O is happening.
Yeah, but there was another benchmark you created with releasing Savepoints, and we also saw something different, like strange there. Do you know what's the reason of that?
With releasing, like experiments with release Savepoints, still not 100% clear to me. Still trying to understand what's happening there.
Okay, thank you. So one action point, I think it's important. I will try to collaborate with Stan asynchronously when he goes online to make the decision about which implementation direction we should take regarding the instrumentation.
As I understand, we cannot use release Savepoints because how the code works, if it's like stack, so we have a lot of exceptions. We need all of them to be ready to jump backwards, right? So we need all Savepoints. We cannot release them, right?
It depends how you structure the code, because you can have multiple blocks in sequence, and this way it's possible, because when we exit the block, we are creating a subtransaction in. We will release the Savepoint, and when we have a couple of blocks processed in sequence, it's going to result in flat one level deep subtransaction. But when we nest blocks, that's causing nested subtransactions.
Like from database perspective, like the most useful case for Savepoints is to keep the previous part of transactions, like avoid repeating it, right? So the latest Savepoints is the most useful. If we can adjust the code, I don't know, Rails or something, like we go back to the roll back to the latest Savepoint, but if we need to roll back further, we just roll back to the very beginning, so whole transaction. If it's possible, I think from database perspective, it looks like good, but I don't know about Rails here.
It's possible, but requires some refactoring.
We are at 20 minutes, so let me just summarize. Looks like we don't know why, and we want to do the instrumentation first, and that will help us to understand the root cause. That's basically what we have concluded. So that leads to me that there's no short-term solution to cure the problem or to mitigate the chance of the incidents in the production. So I have this bullet 6 here because that's 2 actions called out by Stan. Does that make sense to work on in the short term, or that's also premature to call those actions?
From what I understand, these workers are creating a lot of SQL queries and subtransactions, and are kind of an anti-pattern. So this is something we should fix anyway, presumably. So I think it makes sense to work on them in parallel.
So sorry to keep playing devil's advocate here, but if you just go to a specific case of the store security reports worker, right? Like, I can't think, and that seems to be a particularly bad user of these, mainly because I guess it just runs for a very long time and it's got a lot of other problems with it as well. But I can't imagine a case where the business logic in storing that security report in the database is so complex that it needs to have all of these save points. Like if we took that one, which is the worst case, like it gets us a security report from a runner and it puts it in the database. There's no need for save points in that, any save points. That's a really, really simple operation. Like take the data, store it in the database. So can we not just look at that worker and get rid of and look at getting rid of the save points on that particular worker, which has got lots of other problems that are causing a lot of other issues, by the way.
Like my look at that some time ago as part of the rapid action says it should be rewritten simply, because like
I agree.
This code is like not bulk insert, and it should be bulk insert with upsert or like update on conflict. And right now it does n+1. And like when we look at metrics, it was like the one producing most SQL calls of all workers.
Camille, we see it using an hour's worth of CPU sometimes for one job, right? So it's really, really bad. And obviously it's doing something in there that it shouldn't. But if we're looking at a rapid action now, I would say look at that.
Yes, but like there is like the structural problem. It does that one by one. It tries to normalize everything. It naturally creates a contention if you want to insert a lot of alike reports, which is actually pretty accurate on the subsequent runs of like a lot of similar pipelines. So if you have GitLab org, GitLab repo, you maybe is trying to insert, I don't know, 1,000, 10,000 of very similar records, and you kind of traversing them inefficiently because you really want to denormalize, like keep it in a normalized structure.
And I think
for GitLab, we looked at this yesterday. It has 11,000 reports every time it runs, so it is a lot.
And we insert each one after each pipeline, and we do it kind of mostly n+1. There is like a very limited amount of the bulk insert in that code. So I think like from my perspective, it should be bulk insert, update, no conflict, or something like that, because right now it's just gonna generate a lot of very small transactions. Especially.
What about if that's the rapid action? What about if we just say that that's the first rapid action is fixing that?
Let's not make it a rapid action. Let's just make it an infradev.
Okay, sorry, I beg your pardon.
Infradev 1, step 1.
Yeah. But what about if we really focused on that? Like, I mean, Camille, you probably know this better than anyone, but is it really hard to refactor it, like, or rewrite it?
It's gonna be hard to rewrite it, but I think what we can do, there are a few constructs that generate transactions and save points where we could simply not do them. So I think we can focus on reducing the amount of the sub-transactions or transactions in general created. And this is exactly what Stan presented, safe and sure unique. This is the pattern that we always create a save point or transaction. And we simply know that it's imperformant. So we can get rid of that and we can change its pattern. So I think we should be able to reduce the amount of the transactions created by that. And probably this would be the first step. And really like the next step would be figuring out if this can be bulk insert, which is I think like much bigger task to do.
Yeah, and that's why I think we should work on this in parallel. There is a small chance that this is going to fix the problem, the root cause of the performance degradations. And this is going to, it would be both great and bad. Great because we would fix the problem, bad because we wouldn't be able to go to the bottom of the root cause.
More importantly, the people that can work on this are actually people that don't have as much reliability work. So I don't think we're making any trade-offs with it. So who's writing it up? Andrew, is that you or like?
I'm certainly not a domain expert in that area. Camille, would you be able to?
I can spend some time look at that and outline some maybe immediate things that we could do there. Yeah, I think this is exactly, Christopher, what you're looking for right now, right?
Right. Basically, what I'm trying to do is get it to the right people's hands so that then they can start working in parallel. but we need like some description of what that work consists of.
Yes, I think this is like a 50-50% chance that this is like the cause, but we know that this is probably the one.
We need to do it anyways.
Like if you're saying like a lot of problems.
If you're saying we need to rewrite this, we need to do it anyways. Let's just go do it. Especially if it's not, we're making trade-offs with other personnel. Like that's the only consideration I would have in this situation. But if we need to go do it, we're working on reliability this quarter. Let's just go do it.
I think we can try to solve like the first problem, which is transactions. Maybe this will be helping, but maybe we relieve some of the pressure, and then we could figure out exactly how to rewrite it with the focus on the CPU time, what you, Andrew, exactly described. Because this effort will be significantly more complex, and it may actually require changing some of the database structure as well.
Okay, so we decide. So for this storage security report worker, Camille, you will write up an issue, and we will find out who can work on that. I will work with Christopher on that. That's a short-term thing we can work on, and meanwhile, we work on the instrumentation. And when we get more data, I think the long-term solution could be just handling the long transactions in an appropriate way, either reduce them or break them up or something based on our investigation. Is that the conclusion from this meeting today?
Let me ask a question first. Do we know like who is the current owner of the store security reports worker?
Threat Insight, and also that engineer manager is Tiago. He already expressed in the issue that if their team is going to work on this, they have to drop some infra dev issues there. Right. So I think Christopher, we probably need to work on that with Todd to see how to balance the team's load if we decide to have this team work on, because right now I'm leaning towards this team should pick it up because this is in the specialty domain. I'm not confident that any general like a database engineer will be able to do that. This is very feature tied.
Yeah, no, we're good on Todd's team working on it. I'll have to look at. We'll have to have Todd tell us what we're trading off associated with it. But I think
I was also. Sorry, go ahead, Christopher.
I think the other infra dev. My gut says the other infra dev issues are a lower priority than this at this point.
I think the other concern I would have is maybe reduce Camille's role in there and being like the advisor, but just tell them this is your number one priority. Here's where you should go look, and let them write it up and have Camille review it rather than being the owner on writing this up, because Camille's got a few other things going on. Yeah,
I think Camille's just to write up what needs to be. I mean, write out the issue and the idea. That's it, and being the consultant, because the sharding or decomposition, we cannot share Camille's.
I don't have like infinite amount of time on that, so I will simply time box it to like 2 hours and outline the main problems, and then just kind of like look like pass that through to other people.
Perfect.
That's my role.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. We are at the time. Thank you, everyone.